Getting run over by a 3-3 GOATS composition feels like a lump of coal in your stocking, but Santa Jeff will pick you right up. If you're a fan of diversity, well, it seems like the Blizzard team has been directly aiming to create that, involving heroes that really struggle to find a niche in many of the other metas, now are being buffed into being some of the most reliable counters up against some of the other most reliable comps. Of course, we're talking about Bastion Sim and this hilarious team comp yet again. No, this isn't a repeat. Atlanta Academy seriously runs this strategy, and keep in mind, they are the #1 team in the North American Contenders region currently. No meme, no jokes. Bastion finally is a crucial meta component, and I wanted to talk a bit about how that came to be, but also break down some of this craziness and make some sense of it. Normally, Bastion's biggest weakness is a Diva Bomb, because he can't move. Tossing one at him should ideally completely counter this entire setup, but it's sugar-free on the Symmetra, who walls off the explosion of the bomb. His Zenyatta escapes with Transcendence, and our El Presidente, the Bastion, very carefully falls into safety away from the explosion, just in time for the counter Diva Bomb to land. And you'd be wondering, if you haven't seen our previous videos, well, why would you ever run this Bastion? The reasoning behind it is because, of course, the major strength that GOATS comp has to run over everything in the game. When this patch first started to swing, I talked a lot about us entering a control meta, and I think this is the very best argument to show that that's the case. Control is a word that gets tossed around in card game metas, like Hearthstone, or you could think of it as playing for the long game in StarCraft, going for upgrades and crazy tech. That's how the Bastion Sim team comp works, just like a crazy expensive card in Hearthstone that you have to somehow survive to the end game to use. Bastion Symmetra needs a purpose for that firepower to be set up, which was always traditionally Bastion's problem, but the complexity that's been added to the game and the mid-fight potential that Symmetra's rework granted her is undoubtedly opening up as a position in the metagame to deal with the max sustain comps that otherwise would run rampant and are largely unbeatable in a lot of situations. Now, on the old patch, of course, even when we're showing the Contenders footage, they're running this Bastion stuff on older patches that we're not even playing on. On the newer patch, Bastion and Sim are both buffed, which is why we're seeing so many streamers pull out the Omnic turret character to somewhat hilarious and effective use. Previously in the game, there was not really a need to bring this much firepower isolated into a turret, but now with the power creep escalating so far, characters like Bastion and Sim, and oddly enough, to complete the full trio, I would even toss Torbjorn in there as well, are a bit of an antidote to the extremely synergistic multi-tank comps. And I really think it's just a matter of time until the teamwork aspects of how to properly get Symmetra's value with Teleporter get fully panned out. We see this in dribs and drabs. Whenever a Bastion is set up, the fight engages, the enemy commits onto him, but he teleports away. And if you pull that off, I think you basically win the team fight. Because if you think about it, the entire weakness of what's supposed to stop Bastion's incredible power from working is that he can't easily reposition. But if you nail that play, especially if you're going up against too many tanks, they're going to eat so much damage by the time they lock you down again, you're going to just win the HP battle altogether. It's comps like these that I think are just so strong on the current patch. GOATS cannot continue to be meta due to how strong this wrecks it. Look at Defran set up in this double shield setup. If you remember from my meta discussion, I told you double main tank with 2 main shields is going to be even better against GOATS, and I think this shows it a great example why. We have 2 tanks that both can absorb an enemy Reinhardt Wing into them. And with so many barriers in the way, as well as just the Bastion in general, you really remove any potential offense that the Brigitte even hoped to have. In this clip we're watching from Defran, they're not utilizing the Sim, and that reveals how weak Bastion can be when he gets overwhelmed, but I think if we just run the Sim here, who can zone and deny space, as soon as you bait the engage and you teleport your Bastion away to safety, you instantly win. And a lot of these big engagement ults can get countered by the Symmetra wall as well. I'm not exactly sure if this happened accidentally or if it's like the greatest meta mastermind play that Blizzard has ever developed, where you look at characters like Bastion Sim Mei and get low to no playtime whatsoever in the Overwatch League, and by the time that it comes around this January, well, 3-3 comp is still strong, but everything that counters it has been buffed, and not only that, Blizzard was keen to make sure to put the anti-GOATS kit into the hands of characters like Bastion Sim, Mei, and Reaper, hopefully. Not all of them made the cut, but that's where the buffs went anyway, with an attempt to keep it in check. And then in turn, I think a lot of the characters from the previous meta before GOATS, be it either snipers or some of the flankers, are in turn good against the anti-GOATS characters. So what I'm saying is there's essentially a long game that it appears they're trying to go for in order to get that three-pronged approach to tank comps, anti-tank comps, and then the anti-tank comps, or right back to the center where we started with dive and snipers being viable again just by the pure presence of tanks being so good and the need to counter them to be so required, unless you just want to straight up mirror GOATS. I also wanted to be sure to explain to you guys how to counter this sort of setup when it comes into your own ranked games, and I think I can make some really simple rules that you can follow to beat this kind of setup. Here I'm playing Torb in a solo heal Bastion Sim Mei, complete choke control, complete quick play-esque zoning, and the enemy is attempting to run a fairly meta 3-tank Symmetra teleport to point. Pros run that strat too, but turns out all of our quick play strength is too strong. And why is that? Well, I think the biggest mistake I see people make when you're going up against, let's say, Bastion, Torb, turrets, things like that, is not quickly realizing what space you want to fight in and what characters are even good or bad up against this setup in general. So first and foremost, brawl characters bad. Because all these zone control picks kind of play keep away and get their value as you waste time trying to rush them down, Brigitte and Zarya are all but useless up against them. Yeah, Brigitte's shield might hold up for a little bit, but even Rein is suspect, because he just plays too slow and he doesn't have anything to fight, and is only as good as the characters that you're bringing alongside him to take on some of these characters and directly counter them. You especially should watch our How Pros Counter Bastion video if you're dealing with pirate ship or that kind of stuff, but just with this basic sim Bastion teleporting on random maps or Torbjorn set up in the distance, make sure you get ranged firepower in positions where they can fight. Hanzo, Widowmaker, even Soldier is a lot better sieging into these defensive strongholds, because all of those characters are going to succeed where Sim and Torb are really bad. Now, at the same time, you need a direct answer to the Bastion itself, so you have to run a diva. It's your only hope, even though teleporting away from the bomb can still outplay it. The bomb itself is quite good, but also Defense Matrix is the only tanking in the game that can even somewhat handle itself up against Bastion's incredible damage volume. So with that, you need to bring some combination of either disable or the damage I was talking about earlier. Reaper and Roadhog can get it in close range sometimes, but especially with it teleporting, that might not be an option. You should really consider a Sombra, who's going to have to dodge the builder value, but eventually will get EMP that will just knock Bastion out of his turret form for a while, making him a lot more exploitable, especially when you have a diva to rush him down. Rein's shield can last like a second, and will be good once he gets in close range versus the Bastion, but it's difficult to do so. Beyond everything that I just said, it's mostly a positioning game. Don't get too excited to go get more ground than you can control. You have to zone bit by bit of the map and make sure your whole team sustains while you set up the ranged firepower to slowly win out. Going back to square one with this, to the Atlanta Academy game, they're famous now for running this, so first gen came out with this double spam, which I think is fine. Note that the Mercy damage amp to help break the shields is crucial here, as well as full restraint from the rest of the team until they get the barrier down, then they start to engage. I think that's a really easy mistake to make up against the Bastion. Most of the team should not commit if you're playing to break the shield, because if you quickly peek around corners, Bastion should not be able to kill you. And Pharah and Hanzo don't have ranged drop-off, so they poke this down before going in. This does end up forcing Saucy off the Bastion when they focus him to come back on a Tracer, which then in turn they eventually go to Goats, but then they just set up the Bastion again like I showed you at the start of the video with the Symmetra on the high ground of B where they full hold. Now if your game doesn't look this organized and even the defense isn't all set up to contain the choke, of course they're doing that to counter Goats, full commitment to the choke. And if everybody's spread out like they were in my game, well, just focus on taking some high ground somewhere while you start to pick things off and slowly take map control. I think Mercy's really key for that, because if somebody makes a mistake on one of these peaks, you can res it back up. So you got to put the resources into the hands of some ranged firepower, which ultimately will win out against this. You just have to have the patience to take the time to clear everything safely, rather than just like rushing to point like the enemy did in my Hanamura game. Remember, I know Goats Meta broke this rule a little bit, but you always need to care about the team fight before the objective, because if you die trying to get the objective, you're not ever going to get it. Well guys, that's everything for today's video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, and you're gonna want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter. You can come interact with us on there. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.